Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Dimitri, who is a financier, crypto bro, a workout guy, and quite a stellar writer. I stumbled across his work on Twitter and have perused his Substack and just dazzled by his intellect and wanted to have him on. And in this conversation, we talk a lot about the financial markets and his take on the current American administration under the banner of Trump, and basically how the financial system speaks to world affairs. And then in the second half of the conversation, we talk about more political or cultural issues. Great guy. You can find his work linked in the description. If you enjoy this content, consider liking, subscribing, and donating via the links below. Without further ado, here is Dimitri. How's it going?
Good. Going well, man. Good to speak with you.
Yeah.
Enjoy your vibe and essence on the timeline. I'm glad I talk to people like you. That's good.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you got a great vibe too. You're really intense as a writer. Has this been a long time passion of yours that like suddenly come over you?
I've been writing for no, yes and no. It sort of developed naturally. I started doing it organically like back in my mid early 20s, and got published in some financial publications and then some political ones and stuff like that through just submitting them and reaching out kind of thing. And then sort of stopped doing it for a bit and began doing it again when I started working, in DeFi and in crypto, and mostly as a way of just getting to know people. And it kind of has grown and proliferated from there. So very organic. I didn't intend to, wasn't like a thing like I want to be a writer. I've never actually thought that in my life. I just do. I just do it. So I guess that's what I am.
How did you end up in finance other than pure lust for mammon?
I have always been very drawn to that naturally. Kind of, I guess, with writing too. It was just a thing independent of school. I have my formal background in most things. Like I don't have a credential to point to. I'm very like self-directed, and I was just drawn to it. I was always watching CNBC and financial stuff in my early 20s, and I think I just like what it represents insofar as I view it as a form of like of communication fundamentally. Like verbal communication is just exchanging words and information with each other to figure things out and organize people at a micro and macro level. And finance is the incentive based motivation of that. I view financial transactions as exchanges of economic information kind of thing. And I think it's another form of communication almost in a way. And I'm just very drawn to that and what it signifies and means and what those flows sort of represent. And this is a post hoc reflection on why I'm drawn to it, to be frank. I am attracted to it, and I think that's why. Like, I am not attracted to the day-to-day trading a chart. I'm not that kind of finance guy. I'm not looking at, low time or high time preference stuff like that. I'm more scope-based stuff.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on USD?
The dollar?
There was this post, and you hear these theories, and they have a certain amount of glamour. They're attractive when somebody has this narrative that they can project on something. Somebody was saying that they're following gold, and there's some sort of massive transfer of gold out of Europe to somewhere, and they theorized that the U.S. is buying all the gold that it lent places back in order to devalue the dollar and force everybody else to to rearrange the financial market to inflate the dollar, something about solving our debt crisis, stuff like that.
I mean, one, like speculation like that, I don't know. But two, I think that's predicated on a very archaic understanding of what money is, and namely how sovereigns manage that money. We don't have a debt crisis in the terms that people conceive it as in time, the way that like Elon talks about it. Like, we discuss governments as if they're households. It's like, how are we going to pay for the thing? We're bankrupt. It's like, it's not an applicable construct. The government, and this sounds trite, but I think people say this, and this is like, I write about this too. People have a verbal understanding of what I'm about to say, but their embodied understanding is totally disconnected from that. The United States wills its own currency out of the ether. Like, it doesn't have sovereigns don't default. They're not in terms of solvency. There's not a solvency issue here. The U.S. might have what's known as a soft default, which means it needs to cover its debts by printing money, which means it inflates things, which does hurt people. Like there's no way to get out of having repercussions for wayward spending, but it's not a solvency thing. Like it's not like we need gold to fix our debt so we don't default. It's like, no, those bonds will never default. Like just mechanically speaking, US checks don't bounce. The TGA, which is the Treasury General Account, where those payments come from, the limitations on that are completely self-imposed. There's a lot of ways to put money in there. And again, it's not, it doesn't need to collect money to put money back out. Like the US government doesn't need that. It doesn't need to take in your dollars to put out its dollars. The essence
But it
of
still takes my dollars.
It still does, yes. And functionally, what that's actually doing is just decreasing aggregate demand because it needs to remove some money out of circulation. If it puts it back in, that's not as inflationary, right? Because if it's just reorganizing money, that's not as inflationary as just dumping more money out of the system. So you should really view functionally your taxation as not the US government funding itself, but reducing demand in one pocket of people and redistributing it to someone else. It's a redistribution of dollars to keep inflation in check. You should always just view it from the lens of inflation because that's the limiting constraint on governments. That's why they just can't print money into oblivion and fix their problems. You inflate everything. Yeah. So your taxes, it's better to functionally understand them as reducing aggregate demand than funding the federal government. Yeah. And so gold is like one of those things that has a value independent of like a fiat type of system, and it is worth something, but it's not like necessary for the government to function or organize itself.
Okay. When you say that the sovereign has a different relationship to money than the household, is there a way of reading the financial market in such a way that we could understand who is the sovereign, right? Because the U.S. is the sovereign, and it has been for a while now. We see some movement politically about it, maybe withdrawing from Europe, withdrawing from NATO. So I'm wondering, like, if you look at the financial market, does it tell you who the sovereign is, or what different, if there is a multipolar world or a unipolar world on a unipolar world on the world stage? Can you read that in the?
So I mean, a sovereign, like there's two ways to kind of see that. Like you could see it. A national sovereign is fundamentally he who can defend his own borders on his own coin and will and wage war. That's how I view a national sovereign. If you can't wage war and unilaterally defend yourself, you're not really sovereign. You are a serf in many ways. Europe fits that distinction in many ways from a military standpoint. However, from a financial standpoint, they are a sovereign. And by that I mean, if you print your own currency and manage your own fiscal expenditures with a currency that you collect and impose taxes in, you're a financial sovereign. You do, because you what that means is your checks will never bounce. What that means is you do have the ability to actually galvanize and incentivize certain domestic behaviors accordingly with your own token, with your own coin. So like financial sovereign and sovereign, like a national sovereign, maybe. The U.S. is a genuine sovereign on both domains. China too, Russia as well. Europe not as much. In smaller countries, it depends. It really depends. So depending on how big of a economy you are and how much demand of your currency exists abroad, really kind of constrains your ability to run deficits or spend kind of thing. So the US is getting away with these massive deficits because, and really, that inflation is rather tame for how big it is. We had a huge inflation bout, but that was really because of COVID stuff, which was above and beyond crazy. But before then, we've had big deficits for a while, and we've struggled with lower inflation levels, like 1% to 2%. Like it's been low. And the reason why we're getting away with that while running huge deficits is because there's huge demand for dollars overseas. People actually want to hold these things, denominate debt in them. It's a shelling point for commerce, which is all a reserve currency is. It's not an official designation. It's just a shelling point that people converge on because we will transact in this. So we want to hold these dollars. We will denominate debts in overseas dollars. I think the amount of debt overseas denominated in dollars is about as big as the US deficit, roughly. It's very big. It's really big. So there's a lot of demand for this. So basically we're getting away with putting all these dollars into the world and not it's seeing a huge amount of domestic inflation because like the world is using them. So we can get away with that, whereas a smaller economy couldn't, or a
Okay.
less in demand currency couldn't. So I think that's the way you can maybe read into it. But yeah, just defining the sovereign thing, I'd say there's a pretty clear litmus test there on printing your own currency, managing your own domestic finances, and not being beholden to a peg or someone else's monetary policy. I'd say you're a
Yeah.
financial sovereign, and then you're a true sovereign if you can wage war.
Yeah.
By your-
What's your take, if you can put it in financial terms? And finance and law are two domains where I love having conversations about them, but I can never understand what we're actually talking about. It's just like this whole other different language, but I like trying to think in those terms. I'm wondering from your point, with Trump's slash Elon Musk's Doge team, Department of Governmental Efficiency, what do you think in financial terms about saving money, like the government saving money? Are they really saving money, or are they reorganizing the payment structure? Right.
I
What
like
do you
the
think about what's coming out about that and what
yeah,
that
yeah,
bears
yeah.
for
Like
the future of America?
nominally, it being presented as like reducing the deficit and helping with spending, like that is like technically true, but not enough to like really matter. Most of the deficit is like entitlements, interest on the debt, and the massive surpluses of like China and Germany impose a deficit on us in many ways with how the balance of payments clear. So like the structural issues that are creating that deficit are very, very big things. And they're not things that Elon can like look at and you know, hey, we're not going to send $10 billion to you to, you know, Ireland for transgender ballets. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, yeah, we shouldn't be doing that. That's
Yeah.
wasteful, but that's like not the structural problem of like the deficit writ large and why it's happening. That's more of a very macro based game theoretic sort of globalist thing that results when China and Germany do things to systematically depress domestic wages in their country. China does it with the Hukou system. Germany does it with did it with the Hartz reforms in the early 2000s. And I did an essay on this recently called the insect method that basically deconstructs how these consistent surplus nations are doing things to systematically undermine labor and undermine labor's share of GDP growth.
Their
And
own labor in order
their
to
own
make
labor, their
cheaper
own domestic labor.
products.
They're underpaying their workers systematically with policies, with industrial policies that end up manifesting as trade policies because what it does is it gives them an unfair advantage with production. And unsurprisingly, when your labor input is disproportionately cheaper to another country's labor import because you're undermining their wages, manufacturing clusters in that country. Globalism is just a writ large clustering effect of who can decrement and manipulate their labor more fundamentally is what it is. It's a class manipulation, like undermining tactic to gain exporting advantage and trade surplus advantage. And you see it in the Netherlands. South Korea does it too, like countries with consistent major surpluses. And I break this all down in that essay. So what you're really seeing is a manifestation of very manipulative and parasitic and just insidious industrial policies hurting domestic labor that causes manufacturing to cluster in areas which has gutted the US's manufacturing. And that creates these big surpluses in China and Germany because they're exporting a whole bunch. And one country's surplus must necessarily be another country's deficit. So you have to, like, the way these things structurally clear, that surplus China is creating has to manifest in deficits in other countries, namely the US, which absorbs, I think, like 50 or 60% of the world's excess savings and capital imports. So that's what creates our deficit. And that's like where the big stuff comes from. And now to the Elon question, I don't view that more as like helping government budget. I view that more as exposing fraud and systemic corruption. I view that as more of an anti-corruption tool. Like it is helping financially, but it's just not doing
Yeah.
enough writ large to really fix what we're talking about here. What I like it more is that it's systematically and very intentionally undermining like Soros tier, slush fund operations that are obviously being used for politicized reasons to manipulate certain things and advance ideological agendas and undermine certain things politically. I view him more as an anti-corruption measure, exposing like slush funds and stuff that's like, when the CIA fails an audit, like it's always been so cute to me when they talk about, oh, the CIA can't find $1 trillion. Oh no. because that's what goes into, that's what color revolutions are like, right? That's what like these activities abroad, like, oh, we lost the money, like, no, you just
Yeah.
can't see where it went. To like, it's
Yeah.
there, like the Pentagon knows where it is, it's just you don't get to see where that's going. Elon's kind of digging into that in a way where I hope he's careful. I really do, just for his own safety. Because I think he's getting into like some serious stuff here of what like real soft power looks like,
Yeah.
and how financials are used to do that. And that's why if you look at it on nominal terms, a lot of it's very stupid, and it is stupid. But seeing it through the lens of, the U.S. managing its serfs, so to speak, or keeping people appeased to maintain its global hegemony begins to make a lot more sense. And that's what I think a lot of this is. And a lot of it's deeply political and used to, basically buy compliance or exert soft power. So, but yeah, I don't see that as a financial thing. I think he's presenting it that way, and maybe that's his intent, but it doesn't structurally fix the major problems that create a lot of the issues and the deficit stuff that he likes to talk about and other people focus on.
Yeah. My mother, I'm born of woman. I don't know about you, but I come from a woman. And she hasn't been a fan of Trump, and she's not a fan of Trump. And she asked me what I thought about Trump's rhetoric about, turning Canada into the 51st state, buying Gaza, stuff like that. And I'm not really qualified to say what he's doing. But, there's the sales tactic aspect of it. But I was just thinking about how what's coming out is that America has exerted soft power, covert power, tremendous covert power. And it could be the case that Trump is reversing that trend by canceling the covert and then switching power back into overt power. If America just becomes an explicit imperial nation. What is your read on the possibility of if Americans' covert power withers or is cut off, we still have to exert power somehow, somewhere. Right. And so the Trumpian way would just to be proclaim.
Putting your name on the building, right? Very.
Which would you rather have, and is that something that might be working out?
That's a good. I like that framing. I really do like that framing. Actually, I think because hegemons have to perpetuate themselves and really, do that through forms of economic conquest, and not just like, pillaging and stealing. Like actually being, the United States is legitimately the greatest economy that's ever existed. Like it's not just this nefarious force, but yeah, that's good framing. I don't think the Canada stuff or the Greenland thing, like, those aren't real axes of power. Canada, there's something there, but I don't economically, I don't, it's maybe like a middle tier US state. I think, I don't know. I think we have like 4 or 5 states bigger than it economically speaking. So it would certainly help, but it's not like transforming the U.S. Greenland is more to me like a strategic military thing, like Fairbanks, Alaska, or something. Like there's not an economic stronghold, but that location, the juxtaposition to Russia and stuff like that is useful for whatever the military is doing. So, and then like renaming stuff, there's a certain psychology to that though that I think is really important. And I think like sort of, and it's funny, like Yarvin talks about this, and then I think he also kind of poetically misses it too when he assesses like, oh, they can't do this, the president can't, like he's gained, like he mentions like renaming things, like he specifically said like when you win you rename the road, right? You like tear down the building and put up a new building. Like it's the symbolicness of that is very important. Like he recognizes that, he's touched on that many times. And then like Trump's doing that, and I just almost feel like he's a little too narrow in thinking, well, the president can't do this. He can't, like, it's, he kind of can if no one stops him. That's sort of how FDR got his.
What do you mean? What do you think Yarvin says that Trump can't do that? What's the context?
Just the fundamental limitations of the executive office, like when, like based off what they can't make legislation. The president can't unilaterally enter treaties. Technically, that's the Senate thing. It has to be ratified. Technically, he can't go to war, but we've seen that that's not really true. So it's like things like that. Like when he sends an executive order, he's analogized that to sending a tweet.
Yeah,
which
it's just a really strongly
paper,
worded
like that's
tweet.
true. But we're seeing right now, like when you have a mobilized force that views you as credible, it's dramatically different. Like in 2020, Trump would never have been able to do this, like, because it was chaos. No one respected him. He was being undermined left and right. People thought it wasn't like just the essence of his election was like, holy shit, no one expected that. Now we're not going to really listen to him. But now, like, this term is like, all right, this is serious now. This is a legitimate presidency. He has a
Yeah.
serious, agenda he's taking here. We already ran out all our playbooks of hyperbole, scare tactics, whatever. No one's listening to that anymore. So it's like he has this psychological force behind him now where people are just listening. And it's like that's most of getting a lot of organized action behind you, and he's pulling that off with the kind of psychology tactics that I think Yarvin touched on with like renaming things. And he's
Yeah.
sort of doing that, like renaming the
Yeah.
Gulf of Mexico, right? He's renaming Mount McKinley from Denali, stuff like that. Like I do see that as paralleling what Yarvin talks about. And Trump, I think, just does it instinctively. He has very
Yeah.
strong instincts on this stuff. And I think he just knows that credentializes him in a way that he can just feel the same way he knows putting his names on buildings just makes it feel like it's yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I don't
yeah,
think
I
there
agree with
is.
you. I guess writ large, I do think it's a way to like spread more overt power. It's still soft though, because if it's not military or violence, then it's soft
Okay.
just by definition. And yeah,
Hmm.
it's still trying to further the American hegemony, just I think in a different way, in a more overt, in a more prideful way, maybe in a way
Yeah.
that's less ashamed of itself.
I don't think his enemies could have handed him a greater gift than denying him the 2020 election. I just don't think that. I mean, that and the bullet grazing his head
Yeah.
is
Oh, sorry.
really
When I said
giving him.
2020 Trump, I meant 2016 Trump. I forgot he
Okay.
got elected in 20. Sorry, first term Trump. First term Trump. Get my dates
You're
mixed up.
already just erasing the Biden years from your memory. You're
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like,
that just didn't
didn't even-
happen, man. It was just I don't know who's running stuff during then, dude. No one does, but
Yeah, no. What you said America is the greatest economy that's ever existed. A little bit hyperbole, but what makes America economically so powerful? What is it about
right.
America specifically? Is it just our land? Is it our people? Is it our culture? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I am speaking just in a broad general term there. Like,
Yeah.
just raw numbers, it is in terms of its global presence that it affords it. Also, a lot of technology allows that as well. That who knows, Rome could have probably pulled that off if it had the technology that allowed you to maintain, a military like we do. But just from what the U.S. generates, and I guess I'm looking at this more not from GDP, which is largely sort of fake and manipulated, anyways. I'm looking at it more from like the impact and creations that come from us, like all of technology, the Silicon Valley kind of hotbed, like almost every major creation that has come out that is used currently and that has become successful, it comes from the US. Every major tech company, like there's no Google of Europe, and all of the Googles of China are just, copies that only exist really in China. Like they only allowed to exist in China, and China just really advantages them to try and boost their own thing. I believe we lead the world in like Nobel Prize winning stuff like that, like certain technological creations, certain healthcare innovations, and things like that as well. Like, and that doesn't just benefit the U.S.; it benefits the world because our different system allows that technology to be made and then exported to other countries who aren't making that domestically so much, maybe because of policies or whatever they have, and they benefit from that. So it's like U.S. culture, U.S. creation, U.S. Industry pre sort of globalist hollowing out, like has been. I mean, as far as it's hard to compare to past economies because they just didn't have that technological advantage, but that's what I kind of mean, I suppose. And just in raw numbers too, at one point the U.S. after World War II was like 50% of the world's GDP. I don't know if Rome was that at any one point. Maybe it was, but
Yeah.
we're just talking about like a historically serious, like hegemonic economic powerhouse that when I reference this.
What do you think about the failure state of the American empire? Are we close? From your point of view, like where are we at in a civilizational cycle if you adopt that framing at all?
I am more of a, I guess you could say, deterministic in a lot of historical ways. I do think fourth turning theory is like a very serious, credible framework. I do think fundamentally that a lot of these behaviors that gestate, that are negative, that sow the seeds of an empire's demise, are like the byproduct of its successes fundamentally, and it becoming too comfortable and eschewing the order and structure that made it great. I do see a lot of that in the U.S. we're beginning to see more and more of that with the corruption and with the politicization of the legal system. I feel with what we saw with Trump being targeted, 37 felonies. Like it's just, I mean, it's, and now you're seeing him act in kind. You know, he's also kind of doing that as well with the quid pro quo stuff with Mayor Adams, like the New York City mayor, who clearly said, "We'll drop the charges. You need to enforce your immigration." Though it's like, I mean, he just basically admitted that, and it's like, yeah, I'm doing that. Whatever. What are you going to do about it? You know, and while that is like a superior strategy to do in an environment where the legal system is being manipulated against him, it's a structural decrementing of the legal system, though, which is definitionally ensowing entropy. Because law and order is synonymous with order. I mean, law is synonymous with order. So definitionally, you know, undermining law is synonymous with disorder, which is just fostering entropy. And I see these kind of behaviors becoming more and more acceptable. So I guess that means my answer to that is I do think the U.S. is probably later stage. It's at about 250 years since 1776, and empires tend to last, I believe, along that time. So I don't know how to predict that, though. I don't think it's happening anytime soon. But I don't think the U.S. is ascendant. It's not an ascendant power. I think it's a descendant power.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like reshoring, manufacturing, hedging up America as America, like isolationist America? Is that a pipe dream? Is that just something that sounds good that people want, but in reality, America's tentacles are everywhere, and they're not going to necessarily withdraw with any real significance? Just maybe on paper, things will get shuffled around.
I mean, it's very doable to reshore and bring back the manufacturing and the kind of creations that made us great in the first place. You know, like
would that be good from your point of view? Are we capable of doing that?
Yes, yes. Like what we have, because what people tend to view, the first order thinkers and how they like are assessing trade and these industrial policies are like, well, if we do that, then the trinkets get more expensive. And I say that in a very, you know, dismissive way, but because I think they're being extremely superficial with their assessing of exactly what these systems mean and do, and what the point of like consumption even exists to be. These people tend to look like when I say like we want to reshore U.S. manufacturing, what does that entail then? It entails making us competitive for corporations to do that. What does that entail? It means undermining what China's doing. It means undermining what Germany's doing with their undermining of their own domestic labor. That means aggressive stuff. That means either structural tariffs to undo that system, that manipulation benefit they've gained. It also could mean taxing inbound capital, which is a very real solution that people just freak out about when they hear, because they hear taxing people investing in the U.S. They think, why would you tax someone investing in the U.S.? Don't do that. They're not investing. They're dumping. They're dumping capital into the U.S. because the U.S. has the safest and most secure financial markets in the world. It should be a privilege to access that. And Germany and China have these massive surpluses they have, and then they have all these savings, all this money. They don't know what to do with it. And the U.S. creates a very nice, comfy landing ground for them, which enables this very mercantilist behavior that they do. So, and when you also understand that a capital account surplus must create a current account deficit, like those things reconcile. So the more capital you have coming in there, you are creating that deficit. It's just an accounting axiom. Yeah, it feels counterintuitive. But when you understand that this inbound money has to create effects that manifest in the deficit, it has to. You start to view that differently. And you start to understand like being a capital dumping ground for the world is not a positive thing for the US. The US doesn't need that money to fund itself, because that's just not an applicable concept to a sovereign. And it is enabling Germany and China and these constant surplus nations to keep getting away with what they're doing. So you can fix that by addressing their structural manipulations that they're doing by, again, tariffs or taxing capital inflows. You can't do it bilaterally. You really have to do it like writ large for everything, because trade clears globally, not bilaterally between one and two parties. It's a global system. But if you vitiate that advantage that they've created for themselves by hurting their own labor, you can bring that manufacturing back home. And then what you'll do is you'll foster a lot of jobs and things that have left. You will create that kind of environment that we had in the 50s and 60s that we can just feel was healthier. There was less debt. There was less, there was more, the median income and like the PPP income was higher. Domestic wages, like median income was doing well. Median income in the US has been stagnating and going down for quite a while. All of these second and third and fourth order effects from what surplus nations are doing with their mercantilist policies is hurting us back home. So you just need to start viewing that systematically and removing what they are doing with those labor contortions that they're doing. And then you can reshore a lot of this manufacturing if you fix that, because they'll come back home. Like companies will go where it's most advantageous to create their stuff. In near term, that might create worse margins on iPhones. Like, near term, that might make certain things a little more expensive, but we're talking about what's mostly like certain goods from China that are not like necessities to living. The US can create a lot of its stuff domestically. And you need to see this in a longer timeline than just first order impacts. Like there's second, third, fourth, fifth order stuff of reshoring this thing that can help with median incomes in the US and helping the middle class recapture their ascendance within the system, which they're being systematically eroded by the offshoring and undermining of what China and Germany are doing to their own middle class, frankly. Like everyone's just hurting their own labor pools to try to compete with this exporting stuff. And it's a race to the bottom. And because that's the only way to compete when your competitors are just killing their labor inputs is you have to kill yours too. And everyone's middle class, every middle median wage gets hurt from that. When that's how you compete, you cannot compete on the terms of the insect is the point of the essay I wrote. Like, don't do the bug strategy of, well, I know how we'll do better. We'll import more warm bodies. And that's why you see all these politicians so obsessed with bringing in infinity migrants and the H-1B policy. Oh, we just need the best people. No, you just need warm bodies. You need warm bodies to come in here because you need to keep your wage growth in check. You need, because supply and demand, more people, what does that do to wages? It keeps it down. It just does. Democrats from the 80s and 90s and Bernie Sanders and whatnot used to be very anti-immigration for this reason, very pro-union, very anti-immigration, because they knew what that did to labor. It hurt it. More people does not help wages. And so that's why you see these Western countries obsessed with migration. They don't, it's, and they'll scaffold it with, diversity, inclusion, and whatever warm and fuzzy stuff they want to.
It's an economic
they're trying to hurt they're trying to make, it's the way you compete in a shitty environment where hurting labor's wage growth is how you're able to maintain advantage, because that's what China and Germany have been doing. And now you're doing that too by importing H-1B Indians and migrants across the border, more warm bodies, you keep wages down. It's just a fight writ large for against middle class wages. And that just has to stop. That can't be how you compete.
There was a lot of talk. I haven't heard about it lately because the political discussion's gone in other directions, but there has been a lot of talk about these globalists, BlackRock. I don't know if the World Monetary Fund exactly fits into this, but what do you see that needs to happen with regard to? We talk about sovereign countries, but there's these organs, these elite organs that are kind of have their own sovereignty too. They're kind of threaded through all these networks, all these different countries, and they're kind of exchanging capital and making money for their investors or whatever they're trying to do. Do you think that they are a clear and present threat to our economy, or do they need to be reined in? What's your take on that? The Schwabs of the world and these masters of the universe.
Yeah, I mean, my take on them is, they could probably be fostering a lot of this willingness to. I think guys like that benefit a lot from the dollar being used as a weapon and being something that can be used globally for anything and everything. And though that kind of incentive, like that sort of exists in contradistinction to having a good, robust middle class, because if the more the dollar is a weapon and able to be used for, dollar diplomacy and certain advantages overseas and whatnot, like the more you want to really focus on the financialization of the US and the dollar being that. And that has created the issue that, one, lets us get away with huge deficits and is kind of fostered this balance of payments sort of manipulation with things. I think these guys are acting in their own self-interest. I think they just need to be constrained on, I think if an environment is allowed to be adequately competitive and your adversaries aren't doing things like what China and Germany is doing to their labor, that a lot of this stuff will fix itself. And these BlackRocks and these, big financial firms will just go to where the most profit is had. And that's fundamentally what these globalist clustering effects are, like why manufacturing is clustering in certain places. It's just cheaper. It's just more profitable to do it that way. So like these guys aren't, I just see them acting in their own self-interest, which is really what capitalism is everyone acting in their own self-interest to try and make money. Like I do, that is a fundamentally noble, correct way to have people behave, just in their own self-interest and to kind of make money that way. I just think it needs to be maybe constrained on the more macro level of what countries are doing with their industrial policies and how they're able to get away with certain things. I guess my takeaway answer is that I don't think they're like the major problem. I think they're like vultures in a way. They'll eat whatever's on the floor. And right now what's on the floor is a byproduct of, I think, a very structurally harmful trade dynamic.
Have you analyzed or been watching where Trump might be going with the economy? We talked about renaming things and declaring, making moves on Greenland or whatever like that. But do you have a sense of if Trump's kind of aligned to real the financial market, the financial aspect of what we're talking about with China and with Germany and stuff like that?
I mean, I think he ties a lot of his he cares about the stock market clearly, so I do think from what he's going to try and this is part of why I don't think he's going to be good for spend. I mean, he'll be good for spending, and that he'll keep spending because he wants the economy to not be weakened, or he wants it to be boosted while he's there. He wants the stock market to perform well too. Reducing fiscal spending is not how you do that. Like, you want dollars in the system, and you want banks creating credit, you want stuff like that. So I guess my simple answer is, and no, I haven't been looking at his close policies on what he intends to do there, but just by virtue of the fact that his ego is very tied to the success of the stock market, I think he will be very friendly towards that. And he's already lobbying the Fed to cut rates, which I don't want to get into a tangent on, but that's just not, the Federal Reserve cannot control interest rates like that. That's just not how it works. And yeah, I guess I don't have a great answer for you on that. I think he'll do stuff that's very domestically stimulatory near term, but I also think that means not reducing fiscal spending. Just kind of by virtue of how dollars are created and come into the system and world. Yeah. Banks create money fundamentally when they issue credit. They make deposits out of thin air. Banks are the true money printers, like domestic banks. Like 97% of the money on existence comes from banks, like creating credit. It comes from them. They're the money makers. And fiscal is very, very powerful in how it reorganizes that, and can also make money in a way in its own right. The Fed is sort of an accountant that doesn't really enable those things or do those things. It gets a lot of false credit for those actions that are fundamentally a byproduct of fiscal and banks.
What do you think about the possibility of crypto becoming merged with fiat, or the U.S. going from the USD to US bit or something like that?
Fiat currencies won't go away, because fiat means mandate, and that means the mandate of what's fundamentally a violence monopolist, and the violence monopolist makes that currency by saying you must pay taxes in that currency. So as long as someone with a gun is saying, hey, you have to tithe in this, you need to collect that, and that means that is worth something. That's where authority comes from. So as long as countries are saying you must pay taxes in our token, our coin, our dollar, our fiat, those are serious instruments, because this is something I talk about to people in my industry in DeFi, decentralized finance, which is to say kind of crypto. It's to say crypto. It's just the real form of crypto. That taxation kind of approach is what really imbues the dollar with the serious structural value. If you have to tithe and pay to the government in that, so they might digitize that more. Like, the dollar is already completely digital. Like it's already almost exclusively a digital construct in banks. So it's like, in a way, if you want to call that a crypto or a token, you could. We don't, because of the ledger it sits on. And just to be technical about it, like, a blockchain is just a decentralized database. That's all that it is. Yes, it's a database that no single entity controls. Whereas a centralized database, like a bank's ledger, or the government's, is a database that one entity controls. So they can censor that, they can reorganize it, they can change it at will. Whereas a blockchain is very difficult to corrupt. And control, and that's what gives it open access. Anyone can access this thing because no individual party controls it. So I mean, you're already seeing some manifestations of fiat currencies in crypto by virtue of stablecoins, which is like, Tether, if you've ever heard of that, or USDC, which is Circle's asset. What these companies are doing is they accumulate a lot of US treasuries and dollars and whatever, and then they issue digital representations of that on a blockchain that you can redeem for the dollars if you want. So that's what keeps them tied to that one-to-one, one stable coin to $1 backing. So you're already seeing like fiat be tokenized on a blockchain already, just through third parties and other businesses. And dollars already are just digital constructs from how they exist. Like 97% of them. I think about 3% of currency in circulation is actual like paper bills. So yeah, like it'll get like dollars will exist on blockchains. They'll exist on centralized and decentralized databases. Yeah, fiat's not going away. Like it's going to be. Well, the good thing about crypto though, and what it really fosters, because it's fundamentally a parallel financial system. And so nothing about my industry is helpful to states when understood that way, in which I've tried to frame to like, with a lot of writing that I've done.
Are they a threat to states, or they're just not necessarily?
They're a threat to the soft power of states. They definitionally decrement them, because when the U.S. issues sanctions, say against an adversary, like you can't use the SWIFT system, you can't do certain transactions, right? We're excluding you from the post World War II system we've made. Like we won, we set this up, we're the best economy, deal with it. And the US has done that for a very long time. And with blockchains are parallel financial systems. So that means they're not beholden to banks. They're not beholden to any entity that the US government can knock on the shoulder and say, hey, freeze that. He can't do that. Kick him out. You can't do that with a blockchain. You can't do that with crypto. So we are literally a separate parallel financial system to transact and work in. That is a big deal for soft power. Like soft power is financial coercion, financial manipulations, things like that, exerting your will with economically, right? Hard power is just military violence. So we do not help nations, especially those who have very strong financials or exist because they control the financial system with authority. We're not helpful to them. The United States being the clearest example here. Nothing about DeFi is good for the US's structural power and its soft power. It's a separate system that it can't control. So what was your question again? Am I speaking to your question? I forgot it.
Oh, I'm just, we're embarking on the crypto conversation. So,
right. Yeah. Yeah. So the fiat will exist in both domains fundamentally.
Yeah.
But the thing in crypto, this is what I want to say with that. Is it a threat? It's not a threat to the existence of states. Like, they still have their fiat. You still need to pay in it. Like, they'll still be okay. But what it does is it creates what's known as currency competition. And that's a good thing. That keeps them much more accountable. And by currency competition, I mean, if I can exit your system, like you have the TradFi system, traditional finance, fiat, bank-controlled one, and DeFi, decentralized finance controlled by no individual entity. If I can defect to this system to hold my money, or to keep my assets in like Bitcoin or Ethereum or other things that exist independently of that system, you have to be a little bit more accountable. Because now if people want to defect from this more and more, if they don't need to hold dollars necessarily as like the Schelling point, or they know they can see the financials being abused of these from these countries spending too much, they'll defect. They'll go to this parallel system. So it creates a healthy form of competition by having a parallel system outside of the purview of these states, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do banks use, or are they adopting decentralized finance to issue debt, thereby creating money or creating value through that? Or is it just people just investing into this other system, this parallel system, is what's creating the value?
Banks exist separately from DeFi. Nothing about a bank is DeFi, decentralized finance, and like that's the pure, like. And I say that word intentionally, by the way, like Coinbase, which I'm sure you heard of, right? Like just a brokerage. That is not DeFi. That is a broker. That's a business like Fidelity, where you can just get price exposure to a crypto token. You don't even own it technically though. Like Coinbase holds it. Like it's the same relationship you have with the bank. That is not crypto. Where if you withdraw that onto a blockchain, now you self-custody that in a cryptographically owned wallet that no individual can take. Like the US government can't freeze that. Whereas they can freeze it when you hold it on Coinbase, because Coinbase is just a normal ass corporation, right? When I withdraw it to a wallet though and hold it on a blockchain, now it becomes sovereign in that way. Because the only way they can get to that asset is if they get to you. Like they could arrest you and put you in a box, but they can't seize that blockchain held asset. And that's how it exists beyond their purview. So banks, like when they issue credit, they're doing it within the banking system. They're issuing a deposit on their own infrastructure. You now have a deposit that's held at the bank. And if they transfer that deposit to another bank, that deposit moves within the banking system and the federal system, and reserves follow that to another bank. But that exists within a centralized ledger that banks unilaterally control, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, et cetera. DeFi, once you leave that banking system to the blockchain-based system, now it's no individual. You own the asset, and a global series of validators verify its ownership and holding. Like it's not beholden to any one entity anymore. So yeah, banks do not exist in DeFi. Like when you hear of financial institutions, buying Bitcoin or stuff like that, like they're just accumulating an asset that they think will be more valuable over time. They're not actually interacting in the decentralized finance infrastructure of basically a parallel economy. Like that is independent of them. They're just gaining price exposure to buying assets that they think will do well as this economy grows.
What is going on? Yeah, what is going on in that economy if it's so different that they don't really have banks in there? What kind of? I mean, there's a bunch of crypto bros, and I get spam. I know there's that kind of market, people buying and selling it. But is there like a parallel institutions over in that parallel economy? Do they behave differently than the trad finance stuff? Like, is there equivalent or something like a bank over there?
Working towards it. So right now, this is a very nascent industry. Like crypto is, I know people feel like it's there. And I would analogize crypto to maybe like late 80s, early 90s internet in terms of the scope of probably where it is developmentally. Or, I actually think in its scope of where it will be, comparing it to AI now is actually good too. Like AI is pretty good, but it'll be nowhere, when we get to like say AGI or certain like full on agentic stuff, it'll look dumb compared to it'll look dumb now compared to what it becomes. That's kind of how I view crypto. It's developmentally in a similar, I think, stage to AI, where it's like we see it, we know there's a lot of potential here, but it's not what it's going to ultimately become. Do
we know what it's ultimately going to become? Is there like an idea
for what, crypto?
Yeah.
I mean, it becoming a financial system that can exist independently of TradFi in some way, or it's able to be a true parallel financial system where if, say, you and I want to transact in something, you just say, give me your crypto wallet and I'll send you money there. And that's acceptable to you the same way as if I Venmo'd you something, right? Yeah. It's just a ledger update. When I send you money on Venmo, Venmo's ledger updates $10 from Dimitri, $10 to Ben. And the blockchain, if I do the same thing, the Bitcoin ledger, the Ethereum ledger, whichever blockchain it's on, just updates that. $10 from me, $10. It's just ledger updates. We're all just talking about ledger updates at the end of the day. So DeFi does not have like mature credit markets. It does not have a lot of, frankly, mature financial activity on it yet. It is a lot of nonsense right now, frankly. It's an early industry. Like it does have a lot of kids in it. It does have a lot of kind of unserious mimetic games and pass the fake money in a circle and kind of Ponzi stuff that absolutely exists. I don't deny that exists. And in fact, it's probably the majority of stuff right now in this space. But like this, I think it's appropriate to understand this the same way you would like a new frontier. It's an open access, censorship resistant frontier. So like definition, like who are the most risk seeking people criminals, right? Like criminals are very risk seeking people. And we're not censoring or stopping anybody from accessing it. So obviously there's a lot of garbage here. Okay. Like when you have an open system where there's a lot of money to be made, you're going to attract a lot of good and a lot of bad. And the bad gets a lot of the optics because they're just more visible. But there is a lot of stuff being made around legitimate credit creation, around options trading, basically recreating all the financial infrastructure that exists right now in TradFi, having that exist with stability in DeFi. It is a very volatile environment. The technology is new and still being developed. It is difficult to have applications and certain things run in a decentralized way. From an engineering standpoint, it's necessarily more inefficient because not one party is controlling everything. So there's a bit of a trade-off between censorship resistance and open access and cost, just as a law of nature, basically. So like that is still being developed. It's a hard problem to solve, but The space is growing towards that. And people, if they're not involved in the industry, tend to just see all the garbage, which
Yeah.
is definitely there, but it is not what this space is about, and it's not the serious stuff that's being worked
Yeah.
on. But we're not there yet. Like we still need the banking system still needs to exist. All of this TradFi stuff still needs to be. It's not like DeFi is destroying that, a year from now, anytime soon. But it's working towards creating a viable parallel system that offers everything you can have right now in the TradFi system.
Okay. What's a meme coin?
It's a coin that it's a coin that knows it's worth nothing and owns it. It's a coin that knows it's nonsense. It's like, yeah, I'm nonsense. I'm fun. What are you going to do about it? Like, it knows it's fake, and that's kind of like the fun of it.
Okay.
I would also say,
How do people get scammed by it then if everybody knows it's fake, like the Hawk Tua or whatever?
yeah, I know. Like, they're not being scammed. They're just upset they lost money trading garbage. Like, everyone knows, like, for those things, they're passing garbage around in a circle, and it's a hot potato. It's like, oh, whoever
Yeah.
gets hold of the glass is screwed. It's like, that's the game you're playing, Like,
Okay,
you
that's
get
the game they're
scammed,
playing.
you
Okay,
just
yeah.
Played a stupid game and you won a stupid prize. Like, come on. So yeah, it's just a form of gambling. Frankly, meme coins are just
Okay.
like a Ponzi, narrative based, who can get out first and make money and spike kind of thing. That's all they are. Like, I don't think they should be viewed any worse or better than a casino.
Okay.
And that's, casinos exist, whatever, man. Like, have fun, go gamble and waste money if you want. Like, I'm not trying to stop you from doing that, but it's like that this industry needs to be shaken from that a little bit. It has some financial nihilism in it that I'm working to kill. Because it kind of just thinks everything is a vibe, sort of, and meme coins are just, what's value. Sorry, I don't want to go on a tangent on that, but yeah, a meme coin is just overtly nonsense and it owns it.
Okay. Yeah. Culturally speaking, what attracts you to the topics that you cover? You do some really nice work on the man-woman discussion, I guess, the gender politics stuff. I mean, I guess you are a man, so you think about women, and so you think about this. You also talk about what you had a really cool phrase, and I can't remember it. We texted about it, but like the biological, political, the intersection between biology, morality, and politics, and
Masculine because you have to, feminine because you get to.
well, there's that. I mean, yeah, there's the male-female question, but then there's broader political conceptualizations that you flirt with in your writing and
Yeah.
categories and stuff like that. What drives you there? What is the landscape on that, or why? Do you
Yeah,
talk
like the
about those things?
didactic kind of
Yeah.
framing that, yeah, that's a good
You just
question.
like being you found a soapbox, so you're going to stand on it. It's just because that's just part of your nature.
I've thought about that because I don't know where those parts of me come from. Like,
Yeah.
my writing, the topics I focus on seem like, diffuse and maybe not related in a way, but there's a theme there. And I had to think
There's
about
something
that 'cause
going
I didn't
on.
even, huh?
Yeah, there's something. Yeah, there's something that you're mapping. It's
Yeah.
cohesive.
And I wasn't even aware of what the theme was, like, until I started reflecting on the pattern of things that I do cover. Because I kind of am the same thought of you. I'm like, well, these are, this guy's very financially focused and understands this well, and then it's also got this didactic masculine feminine sort of political and sexual framework there too. I tend to see I'm very much not a rationalist in a lot of ways, in that I respect the complex adaptive systems developed that way for a reason. An emergent phenomena exists as an evolutionary response, or as a Chesterton's fence, that if you don't know what it is, it's doing something and you just haven't figured it out yet, kind of thing. So I see a lot of behaviors, like a lot of between conservative and liberal, as very childish and puerile, and that, I'm clearly a right-wing guy. Like, if you what I write about, like, I clearly sit on the right. I think I sit more on the right in sort of a very decadent time like this than normally. I think in a healthy environment, I probably would be pretty center right, frankly, is my natural temperament. I'm not like a natural hard right dude, but in a sort of silly clown world environment, I'm a hard right guy. I see the development of the conservative and liberal. And, I wrote about this in Biofoundationalism Part 2, which is, the moral genotype,
Yeah.
which, going down to like the raw genetic base layers of where these beliefs come from and why people are mapped the way that they are in such a consistent pattern that falls so consistently right and left, conservative, liberal, etc. You can see how that is cultivated actually in brain scans and brain size and activity. It is genetically imposed. We can, you're, again, I mean this on like levels of like your insula activity or your amygdala size. Like you have more in common with political allies than you think, is a saying I say. And I mean that like neurologically, like you actually do. Like your amygdala is a closer size in scope and function to someone who you align with politically than the other guy. So like there are genetic similarities to people you associate with. And then you can assess this on like the genetic brain scan level, which I break down in like very, very thorough detail on there. But you don't even need to do that, I think, to see this as a genetic phenomenon and for morality to be a genotype, is that the distributions are so consistent. Something I said in there is that nature doesn't do coincidences writ large. If you see a consistent pattern like this, distributions of people where their focus is care harm and fairness equality or sanctity degradation and loyalty subversion, like these moral foundations, that is a manifestation of some sort of evolved genetic trait. And humans are collective. I know we all like, I think we all think of ourselves as sovereign individuals, right? And I think it's appropriate to govern people as if they're sovereign individuals, because that embeds accountability for your actions, which I think is fundamentally what you need to do. It's a way to account for moral hazard at its core, frankly.
Yeah.
Is pretending like you're sovereign individuals.
Yeah.
Because now you're accountable for your actions. But we did not evolve. We are group creatures. Okay. So we evolved as a collective. And that means our traits evolved to be complementary. And that means these moral foundations, these moral beliefs have utility that is expressed in different environments and has certain reason to exist. So like the liberal and the conservative, I view fundamentally as a dyad. In terms of like the conservative embeds what's known as like a behavioral immune system. They're more sensitive to threats. They're more order-based. They're more structural. Whereas the liberal is more open to new ideas. They're more empathizing in their insular responses. Like they literally have reactions that are more open to new experiences and more sympathy driven. And again, this is important. It's kind of the explore exploit trade-off, frankly, but writ large and how people's brain development manifests.
Yeah, when I say I'm a liberal and when I accuse the dissonant right, the hard right, the E-right guys that I speak to about being a liberal, I'm kind of talking about the environment that we all grew up in. You can't escape that we're all liberals because we come from, that's our culture. But secondly, that inclination to be open to ideas, the high intellectual engagement with things. There's a psychology of liberalism that even if you're really hard right or you have to be right in a certain environment, there's still a functioning. Like I would accuse you of being liberal on a certain. I wouldn't call you a male feminist, right?
Yeah.
There's that kind of liberal, but like the way that you are,
1700s, that'd be just a total bleeding heart, right? Yeah, absolutely, yeah, totally. And like to tie into your male female like question, like my commentary on that, like seeing these genotypes, the conservative and the liberal, as it's sort of a dyad that exists to complement each other and to help human prosperity in different environments and have certain skill sets they offer depending on the environment. In poorer environments and more war-torn environments, conservatism is ascendant, unsurprisingly so. Those are not luxuries. Like order is not a luxury when you're in hardship. Fundamentally, you have to be serious. You have to be conservative. Conservatism has a utility function that is ascendant in hardship, and it's how you get out of hardship. And then liberalism, which is a more feminine framework of morality, care, harm, distribution.
Egalitarian.
Exactly. You can't be concerned with distribution of resources until you have resources to distribute, right? It definitionally is a more luxurious, prosperous frame of morality that exists as you become wealthy. So invariably and unsurprisingly, as nations become wealthier, they become more liberal. Obviously, because it helps the larger part of your population more. As you have more resources to distribute, you then begin to care more about the fairness of how that's dealt out.
And it also becomes a marker of status, like a fat woman in prehistoric times would be a marker of status, right? But in a time of plenty, a fat woman's like somebody who can't control their appetites, right? The ability to signal that you care more about the starving African than the fentanyl addict on the street that kind of has come to typify San Francisco morality and that what the effective altruism, where you funnel money through these systems where you don't really care about the people closest to you. It's a sign of status. Like I have enough that I don't need to care. I
view this more on the level of, I'm not looking at the individual. Like I agree with what you're saying, but like biofoundationalism and the assessment I'm giving is more viewing society as an organism. itself as an organism, as a complex adaptive system, like like an economic environment in the society as itself, like something that acts in its own interest, that helps it proliferate. And when it is in a more comfortable environment, it it behooves it. It has liberal moral foundations have a higher utility function for it because it
Yeah.
helps a larger amount of the population of the society, which is a huge conglomerate of people. It
Yeah.
helps more of them to have more of these distributive, more liberal tendencies. But that is a luxury fundamentally. That is something you earn by instantiating good conservative morality that allows you to accrue wealth, to amass resources, fundamentally a masculine value structure sort of framework. You accrue those resources, and then you have the luxury of distributing them, more of a feminine sort of approach to morality, which is necessary. Like these are dyads for a reason. I think these are healthy things to have, and that's
Yeah.
why they exist as complements, not as enemies. But they're antagonistic sometimes with how they manifest. But fundamentally, these are good things, and I map the same thing onto male and female, with the same sort of motivations and reasons they have to behave. That's that I kind of draw a lot from this sort of didactic framework when I assess like male and female, and I'm not trying, even as a guy, like I'm not just touting the male's perspective. Like I think that's probably why these essays go over well. Is I'm not trying to
Hmm.
pander to a gender, certainly not to women. I'm just giving both sexes their due on why they act the way they do and why that's good and how it can manifest poorly when taken too far.
Hmm.
So just trying to be, very structural about it on these
Yeah.
things are complements, not enemies. Politically, they're, the conservative and liberal are complements, not enemies, and the male and female, the masculine and feminine are complements. And understanding how they're competing value structures, they're competing morality fundamentally, is a good thing when held in healthy balance and
Yeah.
healthy contrast. And when one side dominates the other, like in a hyper masculinized society, would almost always be at war, would probably be very poor, would probably be not a fun environment, like we're like extremely
Are you talking about
conservative.
any current cultures right now, or are you just going to let the reader, the listeners
You can
imagine?
probably infer some of those, like, the countries you don't want to live in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And right now, though, in the West, you're getting more of the hyper feminized stuff, though. Like you're getting
Yeah.
more of these things that, and what you're seeing like order is voluntary, like the legal system being corrupted. 37 felonies is a peak example of, to me, entropy, which is what happens when the feminine moral values are taken too far, when decadence is taken too far. You start to forget why order is necessary. You start to lose that structure. And that's what
Hmm.
sows the seeds of your own demise. And that's why the wealthier you get, the more comfortable you become, the more you tend to view order as optional because humans need a little bit of friction to keep things structured. And when you are in decadent environments, that's why it breeds that entropy because you get too comfortable, frankly. I think too much comfort is fundamentally unhealthy for people. They need to be able to work towards something. And when they don't have that, they tend to break things or they tend to forget why structure was there. And you're seeing, I feel, a lot of very hyper feminized morality in Western environments, and that's exactly why I think they're descendant powers, because they're not they're forgetting the conservative structure that kind of made them great. So this is why the balance thing is important. Like hyper feminized is necessarily decadent and luxurious and entropic because you're only concerned about fairness, equality, distribution, and hyper masculinized is inherently far too rigid. It's only concerned with like sanctity to degradation, rigid rule enforcement, no
Yeah.
liberalization. It's very order driven, not
Yeah.
a fun place to be. But it's the
Yeah.
thing you do to get out of those bad environments. You have to
Yeah.
have that structure into when you're poor or at war, and that's how you get out of them. And then you earn the right to have those feminine moral values, which is the essence of the one of the essays in my series that I call masculine because you have to, feminine because you get to. You
Yeah.
earn the right to have these feminine structures. It's a sign of success.
I have one question that doesn't follow from this, but there is a question that does follow from what you're just talking about. I have, been investigating the right wing. I'm kind of a right wing. I'm very sympathetic to right wing morality. There's kind of panic from the center about the right going too far. We all know what the right looks like when they go too far, and it's not necessarily always Hitler and the Nazis, but that's just, we can't get away from that being our prime way of viewing anything that's to the right.
It's an immune reaction. Immune reactions sometimes are too harsh.
Yeah. So I'm wondering what you think about the pendulum swinging too far or just far enough, and if you are in the business consciously or unconsciously of nudging it.
I don't think it's anything one person really does like
Yeah.
can nudge. Like I think this is more of like a collective response. It's tantamount. Again, I view societies as organisms. Like I view it as an immune reaction. Why do you have an immune reaction when you have some kind of degradation or malaise in
Infection.
you that the immune
Yeah.
response needs to react to. And just by the nature of how humans tend to do things, we tend to over swing in both directions. So I would fully expect it to go too far right. Like just by virtue of like that's how you cleanse everything and you go too much in that direction because your near-term memory is so rooted around this bad thing and reaction that you just overreact. And I think it's
Mm,
just a human tendency.
mm.
So probably like I don't know if we're quite in the realm of like extreme blowback yet. We're probably in the early stages of it with things like Brexit and Trump 2.0. You'll probably start to see certain globalist things. I think globalism is also descendant just in general because of the problems it's creating
Hip hip
for
hooray,
countries.
or a
Huh?
little bit of globalism, okay?
A
What
little
do
bit's
you,
okay. Well, I mean,
yeah.
trade is always good. Like, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not anti-trade, but the point of trade, the purpose of exporting is importing. Exports are real costs. I'm giving you something. I'm giving you things I made. Like, that's real. Fiat currencies I'm making out of thin air, right? That's not inherently a valuable thing to a country, right? So it's like the export is actually the valuable thing, is how you should conceptualize. Like, I'm exporting to import your goods. That's the Ricardian framework of like why you export, why you trade, right? And that's why these like free trade guys, these Rand Paul guys, are like, don't tariffs are a tax. Like, that is true in a healthy environment where someone
Mm,
is not undermining someone else. That is appropriate in a non-mercantilist environment where
hmm.
two parties are actually we're actually are engaging with each other for structural benefits each other has. You make yarn better, I make wine better. We make them, we both benefit the most, and trade clears in a relatively balanced way. When you have sustained surpluses, like consistent surpluses and consistent deficits, like you're seeing in globalism, there's a manipulation happening there. There's someone's undermining something because again, the export is like getting someone's goods should be the motivation of trade. Getting their produced manufactured stuff. That is not happening. And that is a result of this sort of what I touched on earlier with the insect method, with like China, Germany, and these surplus nations doing this. So globalism and trade is great so long as people are acting equitably and fairly and not mercantilistically, which is a very hard thing to do because like how are you going to impose your will on how China does their stuff, right?
Hmm.
So that's why trade is healthy, but you need to keep in mind what the adversary is doing and how they're going about their business. So that's why I think globalism, the reaction to the stuff we're seeing is just going to probably be just a lowered across the board. But trade, though, writ large, is a healthy thing. Like I hope we do it in a balanced way. But consistent imbalances are not a good thing. They're a
Hmm.
sign of some sort of perversion happening. So I just want to clarify on that. Like very pro free trade, but free trade means free trade. Free trade means no one's undermining or doing like mercantilist type stuff to gain a competitive advantage.
Has free trade ever been tried?
That's the thing. Like I'm almost kind of describing something that is almost impossible in a competitive environment
Yeah.
because we're talking game theory here, not
Yeah.
ideology.
Yeah.
I'm just clarifying this because these guys who are very simplistic on tariffs, like tariffs are a tax, like that's just so that's such a it's a form of analysis that doesn't even deserve to be taken seriously, frankly. It like only sees a first order impact of the action and not why it's
Yeah.
being implemented.
Yeah.
So in a way, kind of yes, but like I think the takeaway to your question of like free trade has never been tried. I think the ideal of it exists in sort of a fanciful world. The point of that statement is to say, be aware of the industrial manipulations and trade policy manipulations of your counterparty and make sure you counteract that
Yeah.
so both parties force that
Yeah.
equality. It's almost like a prisoner's dilemma. Like you need to be aware of what they're going to do to gain an advantage and
Yeah.
watch that. And as they do things to gain that, make sure you undermine that advantage. And then trade must necessarily be somewhat balanced in that.
Hmm.
So you can force balance by countervailing
Hmm.
any mercantilist actions by your counterparty.
Do you believe in God?
Something I wrote about in biofoundationalism too that I'm kind of realizing is true. Like we all have a God, and seeing where that manifests is, I think, is enlightening. Because if you asked me that like 5 years ago, I would have said, I don't know what I would have said. But now I would say yes. But I would say that manifests as, I wrote in that essay, "Nature be my God." Um,
Huh.
so yes, my conceptualization of God though is the emergent and complex adaptive systems and sort of the truth that's born from natural systems acting in a way that creates certain truths, like natural law, I suppose you could say. Sort of the rules of reality, the rules of nature. if I have a God, that's my God. Nature is how I conceptualize God. So
It just, the question came to me because when you were describing that game theory of two competitors and they're going to cheat, but if you're aware of the cheat, then something balance happens,
right.
which is just like, okay, the face of God is being revealed even in conflict, like fairness, mercy, equilibrium, but you have to have faith. You have to be smart and clever, but it just spoke to me of a faith that you have, that something good is about to emerge if we can just figure out how to dance properly.
Interesting. I'm surprised. That's an interesting takeaway. I didn't intend it that way, but I kind of like I like that interpretation, because what it's saying is basically like, if you want to, God slash nature embeds the ability for you to act in the best interest of society, yourself, and what have you. And when you abandon that duty, when you just go hands off and let the adversary do what he pleases, in a way, I feel you're disrespecting yourself, you're disrespecting your nation. You could view it as disrespecting God in a way, when you just have this sort of fealty or ideology to free trade, even though free trade's not happening. It's like, no, you have a duty to your people, to your country, to the parochial. And when you abandon that, I think you welcome in a lot of other problems that can result in a myriad of issues, hedonistic tendencies, maybe. I'm not sure. That's an interesting point. But I fundamentally think acting in the healthy self-interest of a country, in countervailing certain mercantilist undermining things, is yeah, you could say closer to nature, closer to God. Like, it's closer to finding balance to me. And this is why I have such an emphasis on dyads. The name of my blog is The Dosage Makes It So, which is a homage to the quote from, I believe, a Swedish
Bodybuilder?
No. No, it's like it's a Swedish doctor, I believe, and he said, everything is poison and nothing is without poison. The dosage alone determines if something's poisonous. And my rephrasing of that is, all things are poison and nothing is without poison. The dosage makes it so. And that's what I named my blog. And so I have a very natural tendency to, one, I respect why two countervailing forces exist, and that I don't view them as enemies, I view them as a dyad, like a yin yang kind of. And when there's a dislocation between them, there's a structural problem you need to fix, understanding that you want to bring balance to that. So, yeah, that happens in trade too. Like you see that kind of ethos that I have manifest in everything, in the masculine and feminine, the conservative and liberal, trade balances. Like, it really is an overarching theme for me. There was not an intentional theme. It's just how my brain works.
Yeah. I'm going to go on a bit of a segue, because just you made me think about something, and I want to put it out there before it escapes. So I don't know if I'm going to phrase this as a question, but I'd like your input. So there's this meme that the left can't meme, and now that the right is dominant, you see the left co-opting memes that the right used to undermine the left, but it doesn't work anymore because it's using, the right came up to describe the left, and you can't reverse engineer it to describe the right.
Right.
But leftists can't meme, so they're trying to do that, and it's doing wrong. But there's two memes. One is not like a internet meme, but it's just this metaphor that you find in right-leaning political thought about the high and the low versus the middle. And you describe that in the financial markets with regard to globalists undermining the middle class.
Yes.
And you see that in the last decade, where the hyper-elite have mobilized the dregs of society to squash the middle, ideologically, morally, financially, so on and so forth. So forth. So that paradigm, the high and the low versus the middle, works out as kind of, there's a phrase, I always forget it when I want to talk about, stochastic tyranny or something like that, where you only punish law-abiding citizens, but you let the lawless reign free, and so you just basically terrorize the society to destabilize it. So there's that high-low versus middle. And then there's also this meme, this internet meme, where you have, and it's a picture of the bell curve, and there's this weeping midwit at the top, and then there's this buffoon on the bottom, and the genius at the top of the bell curve intellectually. And the genius and the idiot, they both agree on something, and the midwit has a really hard time understanding it. And so there's this high-low versus middle that works on a right-wing basis where the retards, the conservative retards and the really hyper-intelligent people, they bind together to kind of dethrone the midwit, which is kind of, it's just a reversal of that high-low versus middle that you see being affected in politics to squeeze the middle class. But on a mimetic level, it seems to work that the conservative move towards conservative dominance that's happening right now in the Trump administration, where you have MAGA and the transhumanists working in cahoots to dethrone the midwits that are ruling the government and driving us into the ground. Whoever, like the oligarchy is being dethroned by this populist elite coming together. So it's the high and the low versus the middle in a beneficial way rather than a non-beneficial way. There's something, a lot of the things that we were talking about just made me think about that.
Yeah. And the, I think about globalism, and one of the essays I wrote, and probably one of the more popular ones, called Mid-Range Jumpers for the Middle Class, discusses how these strategy maximizing techniques seem to systematically erode variance in the middle. You see this, and I say mid-range jumpers because if you look at the NBA shot charts, they have been, Moneyball and globalism is effectively the same strategy. They're just manifesting, one in sport, one in trade. And by that, I mean, it's clustering effects around dominant strategies that maximize points. And in sports, you're maximizing just scoreboard points. And in globalism, you're maximizing gross margins, right? It's the same thing. You're just maximizing points, the net income, the points, the actual, score at the end of the day through these maximizing, sort of consulting based mindsets that a McKinsey would say, you should do this. And when you do that, you erode variability in the middle. What's that?
You win, but then everything,
you win temporarily.
You kill the game.
You kill the game. Exactly. You kill the game. People converge on these strategies, and then they stop being a strategy so much. And then you've lost this middle variance. And it's like, wow, who's going to make the first move back? Then you start to have a product or an environment that's just the middle must be preserved. Like the middle must persist. If you want extreme power law environments where it's either Steph Curry shooting a 45-footer or a guy at the baseline, that's like all the shots now in the NBA. And there's shot charts that show this, and it's across every team there. And if you see the trend over time, it's absolutely segued towards that. And to me, I see the same exact phenomenon with globalism. And it necessarily erodes the middle class. And when I say middle class is not a parallel to the mid-wit like you're describing in your thing. That's more of just an actual healthy middle that should exist. To the point you're making on there, like I think the left and right curve tend to align. To me, it's kind of like, who's your God? And I write in an essay called Defeating Nature, I touch on this. I also posted on Twitter. It did pretty well. The left curve, I feel, conceptualizes, and I'm just speaking in generalities here, by the way. And I don't mean to give myself props here with my framing here. This is how I think of it. The left curve to me conceptualizes God as God, like a more religious figure. I pray to God. It's things like that. And to me, the middle curve conceptualizes God as rationalism, as some sort of we can defeat nature if we just model it right. Like we can predict weather patterns 5 years into the future. We can control this complex adaptive systems with our simple human minds. And to me, it's noble to work to improve your environment, but what's known as bounded rationality, I believe, where it's hey, listen, it only goes so far, though, right? In the realms of the complex, it's not applicable. And the middle curve fundamentally doesn't know their own limits. And that's why they're midwits, kind of. That's why they think they have more power than they do. That's why they have a model for everything. And
that's why they're so filled with resentment and worry about losing status. So
and also completely delusional too about their ability to impact these complex adaptive systems. They'll model, a domestic easy thing that's modelable, and then also model the climate 5 years from now and pretend like that's the same model. It's like one of those things is not modelable. I'm sorry, it's just not. Until AGI exists, maybe, and there's a Monte Carlo pattern God that can do stuff like a human mind can't do that. Okay, just brass tacks. End of the day, it's knowing your limits. I think is not knowing your limits is the hallmark of the midwit. Not knowing the domain where they should humble themselves. Frankly, the left curve humbles themselves naturally again in reverence of God. The left curve, or the middle curve, is more just there is no God. It's rationalism. We'll model everything. We can do this and control people, and ends up manifesting in control though. It ends up manifesting in bigger governments and bigger
Yeah.
rules, laws, because now these people who don't know their own limits are telling you how to live your life. And it
Yeah.
creates this very perverse structure when the middle curve is allowed to just act with impunity.
I'm going to really quickly, I'm going to shoot out the people who designed the roundabouts and got traffic to behave a little bit differently are also it's the same mindset that's transing children. There's a like we can change your gender just like we can change traffic. It's the same kind of.
Yes, yeah, that's a good parallel to where it's like, yes, yeah, exactly. Like everything, we don't know where to limit where our rationalism works. And don't get me wrong, in most domains it does. Like we've done a really good job improving our environments. Like I'm not anti, like, academic work, research, right? Like that has done a lot of good. It doesn't apply to the realms of the complex, of the nonlinear. The midwit does not respect the difference between the linear and nonlinear, the controllable and the emergent. That they don't see a difference there. I fundamentally think that's how you can figure out if you're working with a mid curve. Ask them an opinion about what you can model with the economy. Ask them opinion about how interest rates are created 4 or 5 years from now, or whether we can do stuff. Do you like Bill Gates' idea about blocking out the sun to fix the weather? Like, I think their answer to that will tell you basically everything. If you think that's modelable, you are dangerous in a way you don't understand. At those type of people, because they have great application in the linear and they're very, very corrosive in the complex. And the reason why the left curve and right curve to me align the way that you've mentioned is that I think it who's your God? The left curve is God. The middle curve is rationalism is God. And to the right curve, to me, it's like nature is God. Which I know sounds like I'm congratulating myself because I just said nature be my God, but I don't mean to say it that way. I mean, as in like the complex, the things that are unmanageable should be respected as such. And we understand our limitations and we need to make systems more robust or, more parochial, because we know if we try to control a system too large, like the Tower of Babel, right? There's plenty of myths that encapsulate this. When a structure grows too large and disconnected from its base, bad things happen. I think the right curve instinctively understands the nature of nature and the sort of intractableness of the complex. And the left and right tend to both have a, God be my God, nature be my God sort of thing, which is to say something higher than me is controlling something. And it is controlling it through emergent actions, behaviors that communicate a truth to us about how things must be, how the rules of nature, the rules of physics, the rules of human coordination are shown to us if we observe them. And that's seen in nature,
Yeah. I think, what aligns the left curve and the right curve, or the two ends of the bell curve, is a fundamental humility and actually a comfortability with humility, actually.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Something greater than you. You have limits, and knowing where those limits exist. I actually think that's probably a good way to encapsulate a lot of it. Is knowing, ask someone where their limits are. Ask where's a domain where you can't actually do things, not you individual, like humanity, like an expert, a field expert. I don't care. Pick an expertise. Is this a real science? Name which one is a science, because a science means it's reproducible and it has predictive power. All right. So how much do you actually know what that means? And if you think things that have no predictive power and are not manageable are science, then to me that's okay. Well, we're getting into dangerous midwit territory here. And those people need to be kept out of like control of large institutions, because they will unknowingly, I don't think they're evil. I just think they unknowingly weaponize it to control the way you exist and tell you how to live, because they think they know better, because their model says they know better. And you just don't know how to shake them out. Like, dude, your models, no, all models are wrong. Some are useful. Yours isn't even useful. Yours is just made up. Like you have 50 guesses in there that you don't know are guesses. And now you're going to tell people how to manage the weather 5 years from now. Just get out of here. This creates so many problems downstream of how we end up trying to control people's lives, that you corrupt things and you don't know it. It's the path to hell is paved with good intentions. I don't think they're evil. I just think they're naive. And we have to limit that kind of thinking.
Was there a moment in your life where you broke out of the midwit chrysalis? Just assuming that you ended up on the right curve somewhere, you had to travel developmentally through the middle curve.
I did. I definitely did. Like I was definitely like a XKCD, reading,
Reddit,
Trust the
bro.
site, you know what I mean, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's like a
totally.
decent comic, but it definitely attracts a certain type of guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just a slow realization. I think this was actually it, because I'm acutely interested in finance, right, and economics and things like that.
Hmm.
And I continually started to observe. It's like, at the onset, people tell me economic, like, things, models. I'm like, okay, those are the rules. That's how it works. The same way a physicist learns about gravity, it learns about Newton's second law, whatever. It's like, those are the rules. And then I slowly start to see, like with the model, it's like, oh, wait, that's not a rule. Like, that's totally wrong. Like, you made, like, I don't think you made that up, but you actually kind of guessed and you just didn't know you guessed. And then I slowly started to see more and more how economic beliefs are just a simple proxy for political ones. They're just financial. They're the financial manifestation of politics, is what economics is, just bar none. And there's a reason why you have all these different, beliefs and staunch structures and stuff, and they tend to align pretty closely with your politics. And I don't think that's that surprising,
Hmm.
because I think the political and the economic are just one side of the same coin, because human coordination is done through social means, the political, and incentive means, the financial. So you can't disentangle those two things. The economic is the political is the economic. And I think that's also a sign of naivete to not recognize that, to think, oh no, in the economics, I'm doing science, but the political, I'm not. No, you're doing morality either way. And you're just having your morality manifest with numbers if you're doing economics. And slowly just beginning to see that made me realize, okay, this isn't a science. What else isn't? And then just a slow evolution of like kind of the pseudo expert classes. Seeing. I didn't know. What's the disease study stuff from COVID? What are they called again? I forget their names. The class that does that, like that, now I know that's not terribly scientific. That didn't predict or model anything well at all. So just beginning to see the follies and shortcomings in which domains actually have experts, and that they have scientific ability to manage a system and predict its outcome, and which ones do not. And that slowly pulled me away from the mid curve. Oh, we just gotta model this better. We just have to trust the science kind of thinking. It's like, no, science is not universally applicable to some things in which humans don't have the ability to apply science. Like,
Hmm.
we're just too simple to do it for climate or for an environment. Like,
Did
science
that
exists for that, I'm sure. It's just the human mind can't do it. And that's what kind of drew me away from that over time, is having that revealed to me that we can't do these things. And I keep seeing the failure here, and then understanding where that failure stemmed from.
Yeah, did that lead to a form of crisis of your faith in the experts and the systems and the in rationality itself, or was
No
it a
crisis, I just
cool
updated.
thing?
Like, I just
Okay.
realized it was wrong. I was like, oh, okay, like that's not true. I mean, I have certain temperamental things about me that are conservative naturally as well. Like, my disgust response to some things is definitely conservative. And like, as I begin to realize these things too, I think it comported a bit better with my temperament as well when I saw that. So no, it was no crisis. It was just like, I feel it growing. The same way you go through phases as a kid before you realize something was wrong or not true. It wasn't my whole personality. It wasn't
Yeah.
what I hung my hat on. I just thought it was
Yeah.
right. And I
Yeah.
realized it wasn't right. And where the limitations of, liberal and conservative morality and frameworks applied, and kind of seeing that and understanding the balance that they have and the limitations they have too.
How do you keep the intuitive, how do you keep rationalism in its box in your own life? How do you not moneyball your life?
Hmm. Hmm. Um, Maybe I do it by behaving naturally. Um, I
I
don't, I
was
don't,
going to point to the scene that you showed up with. There's a pile of coats. There's a little bit of chaos in the shot. I don't know if I
right.
make
Yeah.
it into the end.
There's some stuff on here, and it's a guest room. But yeah, yeah. I don't map out my days. I'm not like a cold dip guy, right? I know I might look like one of those guys who, you could like, oh, this guy has a health regime and he measures his supplements and stuff. Like, no, I don't do that. No, I used to compete. I used to be like competitive bodybuilder and take that like very structured. And then I realized it's like, if I don't measure my protein, nothing changes. If I don't like carry a gallon of water around with like a weirdo, I'm still fine. Like, it doesn't, as long as I'm lifting, as long as I'm doing the basic things, I have the positive, and I don't need to corrupt my existence with this tedium to
Hmm.
gain this fractional benefit, if anything, from it. Bodybuilding was a weirdly elucidating one for me on that, when it was shown to me that like a lot of the stuff these guys do are really ritualistic to just make them feel like they're like, okay, I'm doing the big guy thing. It's like, dude, the big guy thing is just lifting heavy weights and free weights and then eating good groceries. Like that's it. If you do that, you'll get like 90% there, in terms of like the basics. So it's just, even with my writing, like, or the way I work, I'm just doing what I'm drawn to naturally, and I'm not forcing it. I'm not trying to maximize my cash flows in everything that I do. I think guys that do that, we call them strivers, I think. I certainly I have a family member who fits that description. I know guys who fit the description, where it's like they need to do things because that's the thing you should do. You need to just do it because I need to level up, and at the company I'm working at, I need to maximize my cash flows. I think if you're guided by a metric that you feel you should be guided by, not because you want to be guided by it, you probably are embedding some sort of pernicious pattern in your actions that will eventually make you unhappy, because you're not actually motivated by the metric. It's just a superficial number you're striving towards, or a superficial goal that you're doing from social like signaling or coercion in a weird way.
Yeah.
So I just sort of behave organically as and work towards thing I want to work towards. Like the company I'm building and what I'm creating in DeFi, I am sincerely galvanized by and believe in. And I think it's doing something positive and worthwhile, and it excites me to do it. And that's why I know I should keep doing it. And I'm getting good reactions to it. People are asking me about it. I'm having a lot of conversations about it. I had one just before our call. That is a good signal to me that I'm doing the right thing, and I'm acting in a way that's good for me and hopefully good for the industry I'm in. So I think that's how. And I'm not, again, it's not even intentional. This isn't like you're making me think about it when you ask that question. I'm thinking about how I don't do that. And I'm not guided by like cash flow metrics or the things that you'd see the strivers maybe be guided by. I'm just trying to do things that stimulate me.
Speaking of organic, where do you think your work's headed? Your intellectual output, specifically, your blogs, your thought life.
Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea. Like I hope up and to the right, like a positive chart. But yeah, it's been emergent too. Like it surprises me at sometimes, like what I just like have an idea on, or want to write about, and it just comes out of me. Like yeah, it just emerges sort of like, and this informs some of my opinions and beliefs on how AI and LLMs work. Like the sequence just generates out of me, and I don't even know where that sequence comes from. A lot of times it's like I don't like where that thought, that framework comes from. It just happens when I start like thinking about something. So I hope if I keep thinking in public and writing and meeting guys like you, like it's producing positive effects through like interactions I'm having. So that signals to me like I should keep doing it. I'm enjoying it, and I'm also enjoying the externalities of it too, and things like this. So I hope it just continues that way. I've been on a lot of podcasts lately. The presence I'm having in DeFi and in crypto, I think, can be very large if what I'm doing succeeds, which it's unusual, but it'll work. And so if I can just keep doing this in public and succeeding, hopefully that keeps having a positive impact. But I'm not guided by like, I mean, at least not nominally. Maybe I am subconsciously, but I'm not guided by like intellectual vanity, or like that. I just want to prove that these things are true, or demonstrate these like, these thoughts or philosophies that I feel have a lot of value to them, and put them out there and hope others feel the same.
Yeah. Some men just want to watch the world learn.
I like that. Yeah.
What about audience response to your work? Has that shown you anything about you? Did you learn anything?
Yeah, audience response is weird. My engagement is odd too, because it's very lumpy, and I get a lot of DMs too from like some people who have never liked a single thing I put out there. Like I would never know they read my stuff. It's like, I read all your stuff. I'm like, wow, like how many of you exist? Like, and I get it fairly often, to the point where I'm like, okay, like there's a lot of like silent readers here, and I don't know who they are, but I see enough of this to kind of suggest to me on that. The stuff I do put out there that's gotten a lot of positive reactions in the political space has been the masculine, feminine dyad stuff. The essays, I'm hard, I'm wet, and worship, adoration, valence, like, did really well. So, I mean, I guess that's like on the political lens, that stuff resonates with the political audience I sort of have naturally cultivated. And then on the financial one, there's a lot of response to like the globalism, middle class stuff I talked about here too. Also the Fed stuff I do. Like I have very atypical analysis on like monetary stuff that um,
Hmm.
financial guys tend to like. So yeah, my audience is broad and a little odd. I'm not sure how to really read the
Broad
reaction.
and
It's
odd.
been positive though, but it's not
Yeah.
positive in a traditional way where I'm throwing stuff out there and it gets like 1,000 likes
Yeah.
every time. It's lumpy and it gets reaction from like quality people. And so the nominal numbers aren't always huge, but like the guys like you know, like the people who I'm like who I appreciate that people like that appreciate it. Like
Yeah.
that's what makes me realize, okay, I'm speaking to the nodes I should be speaking to. I
Yeah.
think something about how I talk or am, I probably won't have the biggest denominator. I won't have like the biggest nominal audience, but to me, it's more important to have like followers than a following. So
Yeah.
I'm not so concerned with like raw numbers. And the response from like quality people to some of the stuff has been encouraging. So that just kind of tells me like, all right, I think I'm finding my niche, so to speak, and I'm like speaking to who I should speak to, you know?
Do you have any advice for young men in this climate? The Z Generation Z?
Hmm. I mean, that's an interesting one. I would say try to not be so influenced or guided by what people tell you you should be guided by or influenced by. Um, there's a lot of like what you like the striver mentality, like I mentioned before, like you got to do this metric, like you got to level up, like you want to work at this giga corporation, that's the highest goal. Um, Try to come to your goals organically about what you actually want. And, I'm not saying, if you want to be a poet, be a poet. Like, no, I'm not, you gotta be realistic about what you want to do, but try to find that which actually organically stimulates you and then do work in that domain that adds value. But like try to listen to like the way you listen to your body when you're working out too much. Like, I'm really sore. I should take the day off. You listen to your body. Even if your schedule says, no, you got to do chest that day. Like, no, I don't, I'm achy. I shouldn't work out that day. Listen to your motivations. Like listen to what actually like speaks to you and find things that allow that voice to come out more. And again, in a productive way. If you want to be a poet, I'm sorry, like you probably can't make money being a poet, but you can find things in certain artistic or creative realms that do add value in a certain kind of way or in a language-based way. Like poetry is communication. You can find things that have, belletristic prose or stuff where fanciful communication does well. Find that domain, not necessarily poetry. Like find a domain that inspires you or that stimulates you in some way, and don't be guided by what others say you should be guided by as much. Try to find your actual thing, but also be aware that some people have a natural motivation in them. Be aware if you don't have that. I don't think everybody necessarily has an external inspiration from like their work. And if you don't have that, then find what that inspiration is and work towards that. See work as a simple means to achieving maybe a family, maybe something that you want that's not economically motivated. It doesn't necessarily be economically motivated, um, but try to find what speaks to you and then seek that out more, maybe. And don't succumb to what others think or tell you you should be doing if you really don't like it.
Do you have a ancestor or somebody in which you owe a debt for how you view the world, like a inspiration or somebody really guided you, or maybe even just an ancestor that put you on the path to
No,
becoming who you are?
no, no, not
You're
at
just
all.
you just bootstrapped yourself up?
Yeah,
You're
no,
just the
I'm
American
not.
dream?
Yeah, I'm not terribly close with family. I'm not alienated with them, but I don't have like a mentor. I don't have
Mm.
anyone I can point to there. And I wish I did. Like I wish I had someone I could point to there, but no, like everything I've kind of you're hearing has been for better or worse through personal experience and observation. I don't even have like a metaphorical one I can point to because like, some guys would be like, if you grow up reading like Nietzsche all the time and you could say,
Yeah.
well, he feels like a father figure to me. I've never read a single page of a single philosopher in my life, like never. So I don't have like a singular influence there. I certainly have minds that have helped informative to me. Like I read El Nassim's Taleb's work when I was in my mid 20s, early 20s, and that was certainly very formative. I mean, I don't like the man so much, but I do love his books, and I love his thinking with, because it's aligned to kind of what I'm telling you about emergent behaviors, natural phenomenons, black swans, bounded rationalism, that kind of thinking. Roy Sutherland, I really like with his marketing creativity and his sort of, the way he views problems. But I've only been aware of him in the last like maybe 4 years or so. So he's not too formative for me. But yeah, I don't have like a singular person to point to. Definitely not one parental or related to me. And even like singular intellectually, yeah, it's hard to point one out. I'm a conglomerate of a lot of things. Like I don't read books so much. I used to read them, and now I'm just like an amassing of information that I feel has value, and I really go down that path and learn a lot about that thing. But it tends to be very self-directed. It's not like one dude's work or one person's book, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dimitri, I think we already covered the answer to this question, but where can people find you and what are they going to find when they get there?
You can find me on Twitter. Handle is Back to Bunny. That's handle as I don't have an affinity for rabbits necessarily. It's a reference to something company I used to work at and build for. So it's just handle Back to Bunny on Twitter. On Substack, it's The Dosage Makes It So on there. And if you find me on either of those platforms too, you'll also see something I'm working on called Salutary, which is in the DeFi, which has crypto application, but it actually applies to anything with economic value, intellectual property, anything that could be acquired. Salutary has application to it, and I'm standing something up that I hope really fundamentally
Like a wife,
changes.
if somebody wanted to acquire a wife, they could.
If you could trade people, yeah, you could actually could like anything where M&A applies. It's fundamentally a framework from M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and trying to really help DeFi grow up, enter its young adult phase. It's a very juvenile industry, but it has a ton of potential. I liken it to, your gifted son who's a stoner and eats Cheetos all day. It's like, he has so much talent. You just gotta kick him in the ass a little bit. Like that's what I'm trying to do with this, with Salutary, is realigning incentives and helping this space evolve and grow and do some really good productive behaviors and things. So yeah, Twitter a lot and Substack. And yeah, those are probably where you can find all my writing and stuff. Substack gets the more polished essays and final products, and the first drafts tend to ship to Twitter. So yeah.
Yeah. Dimitri, you're a fascinating guy, very intelligent. It's just a riot hanging out with you. Thank you very much for joining me on a lark.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. I was honored when you reached out. So no, it was great speaking with you, man. And having conversations like this just is the thing that tells me keep going. Like it's the good, like the good valence that I'm putting out. You're attracting the right kind of moths with your light.
Yeah, yeah. No, I commend thee, and I'm going to end the recording now. Boom. Thanks a lot, man.